OTAs are in full swing. The NFL offseason is officially kicked off. We have guys rising and falling, whether that's Trais Hunter not running the crispest routes or Shedeur Sanders throwing touchdowns in 7-on-7s. People are finding reasons to put them up in their boards as well as drop them down as well. We're going to break it all down here today with Chuck Bass on Player Profiler. So the first guy I want to talk about is Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams is a player that certainly has been the talk of the last two off seasons, really, where there's a lot of haters out there, Chuck, who think he's going to lose his job. Last year it was Blake Corum. This year it's Trais Hunter. And Kyren Williams is a faller at the moment. Over the last 2 weeks, he's down 2.5 spots, and he's currently the RB12 right now if you're drafting in best ball drafts, and he's going in the middle of the third round. You know, I think as we've talked, Chuck, you don't seem to be that high on, Kyren Williams. Yeah. Why is he a faller for you, or are you someone that's been fading him, so far this offseason already?
This is where I finally get out of my innocent, optimistic, non-cynical dynasty brain and just get in there with my jaded redraft to best ball. I went on Mind of Mansion and I talked about how Trais Hunter was going to be the next Bucky Irving. That's dynasty, baby. Kyren Williams is going to be such a smash in 2025. He's going to be such a major part of the offense. It might be his last season as that dude, but he's going to be the guy again. Back-to-back 1,300-yard scrimmage seasons, and that's with missing 6 games in 2023. He's not a scrub, and this offense is only getting better. Improvements to the offensive line, the pass-catching room. If he was older or he had more miles on him, I'd be more inclined for a torch passing, but like we're going to get with a Najee Harris or a James Conner, whether it's earlier or later in the season coming up. He's only 24 with 1.5 seasons of full playing time under his belt. My guess is they ride the wheels off of him until he's a free agent and then maybe pass the torch or some sort of running back situation. Who knows? Look, we always do this. We did it with Josh Jacobs last year, James Cook, even Najee again last year. We let guys slip past their worth because of false expectations, either from the staff, the roster, or our own even personal hype trains. He was the RB8 in 2024, leads the league in snap share, red zone touches, and dominator rating, and falls to RB12 this year. I think that's hogwash.
Kyren Williams, snap share wise, number 1 in the NFL at the running back position. I think the Josh Jacobs comparison is a good one here where, with Josh Jacobs, we were finding a lot of ways to, discredit his workhorseness. When he was with the Raiders, he went to the Packers, and we sat and said, Matt LaFleur's offense, how many times did we see Aaron Jones, tote the rock with, a compliment in the backfield with him? And Kyren Williams, last year, opportunity share, right, number 2 in the NFL, weighted opportunities, number 5 per Player Profiler. And when we think about this room, right, you have Blake Corum, who last year Blake Corum had 58 rushing attempts in 17 total games. He didn't make a strong impression, it seems, on this coaching staff. And, now you insert Trais Hunter. Last year it was Blake Corum is a much better running back than Kyren Williams. They spent the draft capital on Blake Corum. He's going to take over this backfield at some point. He was a 3rd-round pick. And then you have Trais Hunter, who was a day 3 pick, not even a day 2 pick like Blake Corum. And it seems like people have much higher expectations for Hunter than even they had Blake Corum last year. Now, what I would say is, look, it has been well noted that Kyren Williams does have those explosiveness concerns. That's a part in his game that he's lacking. And Trais Hunter does provide a little bit of a different skill set in that regard, but it's a contract year. For what it's worth, Kyren Williams is dependable. He's a guy that McVay trusts. And while they may really like Trais Hunter, I'm not overly concerned. If Jarquez Hunter gets 100 touches where Blake Corum had 58 last year, maybe he gets more than Corum did this year.
Mhm.
I don't think it's going to, hurt Kyren Williams. I feel like that's already baked into this RB12 cost for him right now, because when you think about it, this is a guy who has been phenomenal. He was 10th last year in points per game, and 2 the year before that, averaging 17 and 21.3. So I feel like those things are already baked into his current cost.
Yeah.
And I'm okay taking a chance on him in the third round.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, this is a team that knows that they have to beat the Eagles, so they have to be able to do everything. They don't have an explosive run game. They have a powerful, dominant run game. They just they're adding to their arsenal, right? They're upgrading from Cooper Kupp to Devontae Adams. They're upgrading from Blake Corum to Jarquez Hunter. What Hunter does with that is going to be up to him. They're clearly excited. We all saw the video of how excited the war room was to move up and draft him, but that doesn't mean he's a replacement, at least this year. It's just more fuel for the fire. You have to beat Philly in the playoffs. This is how you do it.
And maybe it's a, hey, think about what we can do with Blake Corum and Hunter when Kyren's gone after this season. It's a contract
Yep.
year. I agree with your point in that they could be excited about him, but that doesn't necessarily. I mean, we're talking about a day 3 running back. There have been plenty of day 3 running backs that have been successful, but I don't think they've had as much of a dominant running back in front of them. And
Sure.
I'm not saying Kyren Williams isn't this imposing football player, but I mean, he's not a slouch either. And that's what I kind of get annoyed about with the conversation with Kyren, where it just feels
Yeah.
like because people see this explosiveness like statistic about him, they just assume, oh, he's not good. And I just don't really know where we came up with that.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, look in the same division. The 49ers draft a running back every single year.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter who their RB1 is. They draft a running back because they know you need depth at the position. I could not agree more. Let's not ship him out to sea so quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on to our next guy. It's going to be Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker up 2.5 spots over the last 2 weeks. He's currently RB19, which, I mean, if we're looking at Kyren Williams, he was RB12. We're talking RB19. That's a 7-spot difference. You're getting him late 4th round, where you're getting Kyren middle of the 3rd round. This is a riser. Kenneth Walker is moving up. And I'm not exactly sure the reasoning as to why Kenneth Walker is moving up. It's not a huge jump necessarily, but tell me about Kenneth Walker, Chuck. I mean, is there concern with Charbonnet being back there? What about Damian Martinez, who they added to that room in the draft? Do you have concerns? They did bring in a new OC as well.
Yeah, I have concerns about like what this cake is going to look like fully baked when it comes out of the oven. Like I like some of the ingredients that go into it. It's like when you're reading a cocktail list and you're like, oh, this drink has, bourbon in it. I love bourbon. Ooh, it's got lemon juice. Ooh, it's got a little turmeric on top. And then they have something in there like chartreuse or something. And you're like, all right, well, I'm moving on to the next one. I just don't know. Look, first of all, I'm not big on this Darnold signing. Now I might be in the minority on that. I'm not sure. The Seahawks aren't too big on it either because his 3-year deal is actually a 1-year deal with an out after that. Only cost them $37 million. They draft Jalen Milroe in the 3rd round. There's just not a whole lot that I can look to and say, I know what the vision is for this team. I know how they're going to execute it. Clint Kubiak is still unproven, if you ask me. They drafted offensive line. They've done that before, and it hasn't worked out. So they don't get the benefit of the doubt that they fixed the issues that we all know that they clearly had going into the season. I really think Kenneth Walker is a talented running back. I feel the same way about Zach Charbonnet, who Zach has a higher floor. Kenneth Walker has a higher ceiling. I think who's to tell me that this is not a running back by committee, because I don't think either one of these guys has run away with the job. They've both stepped up in certain situations. They've both also dropped the ball in certain situations. So this might just be the year that they kind of figure out who they are. They're rebuilding in Seattle. This is not a win now team. Most all their core talent is young, except for Cooper Kupp, who I don't know what they think he's going to do for them other than maybe provide some stability for Darnold. But the Kenneth Walker rising just doesn't make a lot of sense for me. I like him. I like where he's going, around that Alvin Kamara, Quinshon Judkins, James Conner role. I don't know if he's going to be a workhorse like they're going to be, but I don't see how much more growth he has in this offense.
The elephant in the room with Kenneth Walker for me is the health.
Yep.
This is a guy who hasn't had a single season fully healthy. He missed 2 games in 2022, his rookie year, 2 games in 2023. I'm sorry, 3 games actually, because it was
Mm.
a 17 game. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, 2 games, 2 games, and then last season he missed 6.
Yeah.
Now it's a contract year for Kenneth Walker, which is something to note, right? Maybe he plays through some of those injuries where maybe he wouldn't have in the past, to show that he can handle the workload over a full season, and not miss games. When you look at in the comparison to Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet, receptions wise, these guys are neck and neck, right? 42 receptions for Charbonnet, 46 for Kenneth Walker. On a yards per carry basis, Walker 3.8, where yards per carry for Charbonnet 4.2. And Charbonnet had 1 touchdown more. Now, Charbonnet played in every single game last year, but the snap share was completely different though, right? When Walker was healthy and he was number 12 in total snap share.
Mhm.
Opportunity share was 11th, right? Even though Charbonnet, played more games, quote unquote, right? When Walker was healthy, he was the guy getting most of the workload here. Now it's a different coaching staff, right? You have Kubiak in here, right? I'm excited to own any running back in a Kubiak system, right?
Mhm.
Seattle's offensive line was not great last year. They dealt with a lot of injuries. Hell, they had a guy retire on the starting offensive line, I think like either midseason or like early on in the season, or it might have been
Yeah.
before the season started, but it was a guy that was projected to be the starter. Now, I think Kenneth Walker's cost here, I'm not overly excited about it. I would prefer to get Alvin Kamara to me, who is a guy that right now, Alvin Kamara, Chuck, is going right next to Kenneth Walker. And you have the age factor with Kamara, but you have the also proven factor with him. Kamara's right behind him, one running back below, but I'd rather take a chance on Kamara, who I can get a little bit later. And yeah, the age is a concern for Kamara, but the health is a concern for Kenneth Walker too. And
Yeah.
Kenneth Walker has a much stronger running mate where we've seen Alvin Kamara do it consistently, even in bad offenses in New Orleans every single year.
Yeah, I truly couldn't agree more. I don't like the price tag compared to his peers for an offense that I think could hit a brick wall. And if they move to Milrow, let's say that does happen, that's not going to help Kenneth Walker. Rushing quarterbacks do not equally impact running backs across the board. It's just not how it always works. It varies player to player and how they're able to move the chains and move the offense down the field. So I just see too many red flags here for a player that I think is one of the probably 10 to 15 best running backs in the league. I just don't love the situation. The handcuff behind him is breathing down his neck. A lot to make me feel like an idiot come October 1st.
Yeah, I think I'll definitely have a little bit of exposure to Kenneth Walker. I'm
Yeah.
not going to sit here and say it's a really tough pill to swallow cost wise. I just you look at some of the guys going around him. Would you rather have a cheaper Chuba Hubbard? Would you rather have a cheaper R.J. Harvey, James Conner? Right, like I don't mind Kenneth Walker. It's just a matter though of like where he's going relative to some of the guys going behind him. You can easily get a David Montgomery who you know what you're getting on a year to year basis. And
Mhm.
Kenneth Walker, how much better than David Montgomery is he on a year to year basis right now? And again, 2 guys that are splitting time, but one guy's in a little bit of a better system.
Yeah.
But did you want to add anything else before we move to the next player who's one of your guys?
No, I would say just to piggyback on your point about going a little bit later, you've got Aaron Jones going down there at RB 26, who's got a quality backup behind him in Jordan Mason. That's the kind of fit you're probably hoping for this Seahawks offense, as far as if the play calling clicks, if the quarterback can come together and these guys can split time and be effective. I would prefer that. Give me the Aaron Jones KOC. I've done it, as opposed to the Kubiak, Kenneth Walker. I hope they can do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our next player. Chuck's guy, Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, bursted on the scene last year. He's a riser at the moment, right? Up 1.5 spots over the last 2 weeks, RB9, and he's a late second round pick, a guy that you're getting likely around that 2-3 turn. Chuck, your thoughts on Bucky Irving and his cost this year? Year two was year one. I don't know, like
A
was it just a
mirage.
blip, a mirage? Yeah, I mean, no Liam Cohen now. Are there concerns there? I mean, you are the
Yeah.
resident Buccaneers guy on this show. Tell
Yep.
me about Bucky Irving, and is this price something that's palatable to you?
This is such a funny one. Like to be ranked as high as he's been, to for the Buccaneers to make as few changes to the offense as they have, and to still be a riser. Like God bless the fantasy football community for believing in my Buccaneers. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Keep that same energy up as the season progresses. I do get it. I mean, like if you take his post 10 splits, his post week 10 splits, which is when he broke out, he was essentially a top 5 running back. And we want to apply that to all 17 games. The metrics stand out. You pull any metric you want about his rushing last year and even a little bit of his receiving. You cannot pick a flaw in the argument, especially with what the Buccaneers did in getting the band back together for 2025. The offensive line is still elite. This is a team that had the third most red zone trips last year, so still going to get plenty of high value touches. Rashad White is known as the pass catching back, but Bucky was still top 10 in running back receiving yards last year. He showed he could do it. If there's a concern, you just have to wonder, is there going to be a reversal of progress with Liam Cohen moving on? Baker is going into his 8th consecutive year with a new play caller. 8th. That's a lot, especially for a quarterback who has shown inconsistency over his time. He had really good years in Cleveland, followed by really bad years. Now, some of it was injury, some of it was play. You have a lot of new cooks in the kitchen calling plays year in, year out. You're going to have ups and downs. Now, they did promote Josh Grizzard from within, which I like. There's continuity. He was the passing game coordinator, previously worked in Miami. And when he was in Miami, you were getting ultra production out of Mostert and Achane. So there's ways. It's really hard to find a reason for Bucky Irving to have a negative perception going into this season. Guys at his size are starting to take over the NFL. I know he's 5'10", 195. You're seeing more and more guys be productive at that size for a multitude of reasons. Smaller defensive players, lighter boxes, what have you. I am very, very in on Bucky, which I don't say lightly because I'm usually pretty cautious with my Buccaneers.
When you look at this backfield, you have Rashad White, you have Bucky Irving, you even have Sean Tucker. Rashad White has 51 receptions last year, 64 the year before, and 50 his rookie season. When you talk about inefficiencies, this is he's pretty much as inefficient as it gets when it comes to running between the tackles.
Mhm.
The one thing I would say about Rashad White is he's a really good pass blocker and he's a really good pass catcher out of the backfield. Something that Bucky Irving struggles with is pass protection. Look, it's a new coaching staff. They did promote from within, so that is certainly encouraging. But on the flip side of that, if Bucky Irving doesn't take that step forward as a pass blocker, and the new offensive coordinator seems to favor that a little bit more than maybe Liam Cohen did, where maybe he can't scheme up plays well enough to ignore the deficiency in the pass blocking game for a
Mhm.
guy like Bucky, right? Maybe they have to lean on Rashad White a little bit more. When I look at the guys going around Bucky Irving, you have Josh Jacobs, you have Jonathan Taylor, one RB spot ahead of him at RB8. Jonathan Taylor as RB8, Josh Jacobs one spot behind him at RB10.
Mhm.
I would rather go with Josh Jacobs for me, just because the competition is not that strong there. I know what I'm getting with this offense this season. I do think it's nice that, look, Baker Mayfield has been able to adapt to offensive coordinator changes, and it is a coordinator change from within. Look,
Mhm.
we might have to get to a point where we start to realize Was it Liam Cohen as much as it was Baker Mayfield? Or maybe both guys were just really good and good complements to each other and both can thrive away from each other, where maybe we need to give Baker a little bit more credit while also not diminishing that Liam Cohen is a good coordinator, because I feel like that sometimes gets a little bit lost in the mix here when
Yeah.
talking about Baker. But when you look at the guys underneath these guys, then you get Kyren Williams, you get Chase Brown, you get Breece Hall, you get James Cook, you get Amarion Hampton. Once you get to that James Cook area, which is RB14, Amarion Hampton, Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker, those three guys I don't love. And then you get to Alvin Kamara, Chuba Hubbard, RJ Harvey. A lot of question marks start to pop up, though I
Mhm.
am bullish on Kamara and Harvey. I think with Bucky, I'd rather have Josh Jacobs. I'd rather have Bucky over Kyren Williams. I'd rather have Bucky over Chase Brown, but I'd rather have Breece Hall. I maybe might rather have Breece Hall over Bucky Irving. But that's something I'm still kind of trying to figure out. Are there guys out of those guys? Who do you prefer Bucky over?
That one's probably pretty tricky. I would say no, and that's so hard for me to say. I promise. I'm taking Bucky over all of these guys, and it really is because there was no magic trick to his production last year. He wasn't overly fed. He wasn't scoring a multitude of touchdowns. He wasn't breaking away long runs at an unsustainable rate. He was top 8 to 9 in just about every single efficiency metric you can find, and plenty of them. He was top 5. And he did so while splitting time. He did so with, Baker Mayfield throwing 16 interceptions. I say you're right. The move on from Liam Cohen is an interesting one because you look at, Dave Canales moves on. Dave Canales gets a great year out of Baker. Liam Cohen moves on. Liam Cohen got a great year out of Baker. Well, the jump from Canales to Cohen was pretty sizable. I mean, Baker, he threw 500 more yards. He threw 13 more touchdowns. I mean, we're talking about a magnitude of difference from one year to the next. So does that come back down? And so therefore, does the rushing production come back down as a result? I think it's just as likely as the opposite happening. And, this is where you have to get into as a sports fan, when all the pieces make sense, but you still have that guard up because you've seen it make sense before. And for whatever reason, the bottom fell out and it was for a reason that nobody ever saw coming. That's just kind of how I feel like with the Bucks. Are they going to win the South for the 5th year in a row? Is the Baker Mayfield cycle broken where he's no longer the underdog and he's the top dog and succeeding? I mean, like historically, it's unlikely, but you look at Bucky's statistics, you look at his tape, and you just go, God, is there anyone else I'd rather have?
So this will be the one. I'm a huge Bucky Irving fan. This is the one thing we'll probably disagree on. I really like Bucky. My concern is the points per game for Bucky Irving. Right, we're talking about 14.4. Now he can get better. Right, as it was a rookie season, he can certainly get better. My concern is Rachaad White is still going to be involved. The one thing I get frustrated is I'm not the biggest Rachaad White fan, but this is a guy that's consistently having a lot of receptions, is catching a ton of passes. When you look at Bucky Irving's opportunity share, look, you would hope it goes up. He was 34th in opportunity share last year, 37th in snap share. It took some time for him to start taking more ownership of that room away from Rachaad White. So that also, maybe the 14.4 points per game is a little skewed. But when you look at the points per game in the NFL last year, Bucky Irving was 19th in points per game if you're doing a minimum of 300 snaps, at the running back position. Guys like David Montgomery, James Conner, Chase Brown, Chuba Hubbard, Kenneth Walker, like a lot of these guys are ahead of him. And a lot of these guys don't have really strong number twos where I'm concerned that they're taking workload. Bucky Irving has to likely be hyper efficient, or I have some concerns. They just added Igbuka. Jalen McMillan, right, is going into year 2, right? Do we see over 100, passes to the running, receptions, not targets, receptions to the running back position? Are we going to see that again, or is there some regression there? And if there is some regression on the reception side of things, does that lower their floor, and how much do they have to make up with their ceilings? So that's my only concern with Bucky, and I am a big believer in him, but that's where I kind of teeter back and forth, where I look at some of the guys around him and they're not in as much of of snap shares. What I will say is this Buccaneers defense stinks, and I think they will be in a lot of passing game situations.
Yeah.
And Baker Mayfield, I think, will probably be top 10 again in passes per game, like we saw last year, which I think he was top 5.
Yeah, it all, that's what I'm talking about. You break this stuff down and you go, gosh, what would have to go wrong here for this to reverse south? I'll leave one little note here. If you're like me and you look at that week 10 on split from Bucky Irving and you take out the game where he got injured, he only played 16% of the snaps week 14 against the Raiders. You're looking at close to 18.5 points per game. I'm going into 2025 and I'm going, is that a guy I think can replicate that at RB9? And then you ask yourself, are the guys behind him just as likely to do that? Jacobs, Kyren, Brown, Hall, all that. It's a little bit of yes, it's a little bit of no, but at the end of the day, just give me the goods.
That's totally fair. I think we beat this one to a pulp. So let's go ahead and move on to
Yeah.
another guy who we did mention initially in the beginning of the show, Trais Hunter, who has been on our show, not physically. I would love to get a guest spot from him, but he's been a guy that we've talked about, through the process as a riser and a faller. Trais Hunter's on this list, and Trais Hunter is a guy that is currently falling. He's down 2.5 spots over the last 2 weeks, which is actually the biggest fall of anybody in the last 2 weeks when drafting in best ball. Wide receiver 24, he's going early 4th round. Look, I think some of it's probably slight overreactions from the practice tape that we've seen. If anything, I would think that people maybe are more bullish on Trais Hunter because he hasn't taken a defensive snap in OTAs apparently yet. So that should be encouraging for some. But maybe, people, are trying to trust their eyes a little bit more and maybe have dropped him down because of some of the tape that we've seen of him running some tough routes.
Yeah, this one's frustrating because for him to be a faller, if it's at all impacted by any of these lame videos, like guys criticizing these route running, like these guys who couldn't even fucking drive like a pizza route are going to criticize the second overall picks route running. Like, give me a break. And it's especially offensive because I've been a fader of him for 2025 since the draft. And now I have to share a wagon with like these dumbasses who have these kind of terrible opinions. Like, for me, it's as simple as he's a Robin. How long he stays a Robin, I'm not sure, but he will always be a Robin to me while Brian Thomas Jr. is lined up across the play from him. Sometimes you get T. Higgins, sometimes you get Rome Odunze, and I'm talking about just 2025. We're doing redraft, we're doing best ball, we're taking our brains out. And that's not an indictment of him as a player. Like, we knew that he's not a project, but we knew that he had a lot of ceiling left to achieve. He's not coming in like a Malik Neighbors. So Brian, like I said, Brian Thomas Jr., top 5 wide receiver. Liam Cohen, he's a new head coach. Look, he's a great play caller, but he's a new head coach. He's got more responsibilities to deal with. Trevor Lawrence is one of the 3 most polarizing quarterbacks in the league with only one really good season under his belt since he's been in there. I just don't see a scenario where he comes out the gate swinging and hits ADP or even exceeds it next year, the year after. Sure, I can absolutely convince myself of that. I don't even need one shot of alcohol to see that future, but I'm fine sitting this dance out now just to see how they move as a unit as we go into next year.
So he's 24 on underdog best ball. In FFPC, which for those of you that might not know, that's high stakes. The sharp money is actually fading him even harder. Right now, he's actually wide receiver 29 as opposed to 24, and he's going almost a full 2 rounds later in high stakes drafts. Sometimes I like to gauge high stakes as opposed to maybe underdog best ball because, look, you get a lot of players that are drafting a lot of lineups and they're playing with softer money. Where when you look at the FFPC, it's guys that are in high stakes, a lot of more money's on the line, a bigger entries, and so they maybe are not going to reach as high on guys unless they really believe in them. When you talk about Trais Hunter, my concerns really is just like you had said, right? he's never going to be the alpha on this team. I truly believe that. People can kick me for saying that, but Brian Thomas Jr., what we saw last year, he had a historical season at the wide receiver position, and Travis Hunter, look, he's still going to play defense, and that defense is not very good. If there are issues where there are injuries, and he is truly a guy who says, I want to play both sides. If there's injuries to the defensive side of the ball, are you telling me that they're not going to consider playing him more? Right? It's different on offense as opposed to defense, where on offense you could find different ways, maybe different packages where he's maybe not in on every snap, but on defense, it's going to be hard to tell that guy to come off the field when they're, trying to stop a team from punching them in the mouth. When a wide receiver burns Travis Hunter maybe on a route, like, you're going to try to tell that guy to get off. Like, it's much different when you're on the defensive side of the ball, where on offense, look, you might get frustrated that the ball's not coming your way, and you might just be like, all right, tap me out. Like, I'm annoyed. On defense, a dude burns you. If you're a competitor, like, he's probably like, no, I want to fucking stay in there and play. Yeah. And so, how much does that affect the production on the offensive side of the football too? I don't think Travis Hunter, I think he can have a good year. I think the benefit that we're seeing here is we overdrafted Marv so high, and we've said this before. Marv was going at the 1-2 turn. Travis Hunter went higher. And when people make the comparison of when's the last wide receiver that we saw drafted at number 2, it was Calvin Johnson. Okay, then why is he not going where Marv was going last year? He got drafted higher than Marv, but he's going 2 rounds later than Marv, sometimes even 3 to 4. So I mean, if you feel that strongly about him, why does the rest of the market not feel the same? I don't think he even sniffs the second round, even if he starts to rise in the offseason. I think late 3rd round is maybe the ceiling for him, and I don't even know if he makes it there.
It would have been interesting to see the perception of him if he went to one of these other teams that really feels like they're lacking just a truly dominant X receiver. Like if he had gone to the Raiders, if he had gone to, the Packers instead of Matthew Golden, if he had gone to maybe the Bills, just something like that. Just because like the difference truly, especially with where Marvin Harrison Jr. was going last year, was like McBride's a great player. But I mean, Brian Thomas Jr., he's 6'4", he moves like he's 5'10". It's just an unbelievable combination of talent. I'm just so curious to see. I think it's going to be fun from a football experiment standpoint. But as far as like, we're looking for fantasy production, we're looking for volume, we're looking for scoring, we're looking for all of that. I just truly don't believe anybody can tell me what's going to happen. And for that kind of uncertainty, especially going where he's going, I just think other guys have higher ceilings.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to our next player. It's going to be Rashee Rice, of the Kansas City Chiefs. He's up 1 spot over the last 2 weeks, so he is currently a riser. Wide receiver 17, middle 3rd round at the moment. And maybe the slight rise for him is due to, no suspension yet, positive injury news from what we've seen so far. At wide receiver 17, Chuck, you're looking at Mike Evans, who goes a spot before him, Devontae Adams and Terry, who also go 2 spots before him. And then you have DJ Moore, who goes 1 spot below him. His running mate in Xavier Worthy, who goes a spot below DJ Moore there. And then you have Devonta Smith, Tetarella McMillan, and Zay Flowers. Talk to me about Rashee Rice. Are you buying or selling him this year at his current cost, which, as I stated before, is a middle 3rd round pick?
Man, I don't know what happened here. This is just absolutely insane. I'm probably taking Rashee Rice over everybody after JSN. Garrett Wilson, McLaurin, Marvin Harrison, DJ Moore, Adams, Evans, all these guys, even Tyreek going ahead of JSN, even T. Higgins. I'm taking Rashee Rice over all of these guys. Now, we have a long ways to go until we get to, week 1. But if the recovery is going well, I mean, I think he's a lock for like 160 targets. This is what this offense was missing last year. I don't think that Xavier Worthy came alive in real time and grew up in front of our eyes. I think he was the only weapon they had on that team that could create any separation. And I think all this stuff that's going to come together for this following year is going to help Rashee Rice. This team is dripping in embarrassment. They just got body bagged in the Super Bowl. It's all anybody can think about. And the last time that happened was just a few Super Bowls ago. The Bucs just pounded them. The next year, Tyreek Hill had 159 targets. Mahomes rebounds. He gets back into MVP form. I don't think they had the horses to do that last year. I think they do this year. Kelsey was a dust. Like I said, Worthy was a rookie who took a while. Brown missed the whole season. None of these guys are needle movers in my mind, but I do think they help Rice as far as opening up space all the way around the field and letting him work in those intermediate and even deep areas, which he really was crushing last year. So he's also the dream age for a wide receiver. He's 25 years old. No age has produced a higher amount of top 12 finishers over the last decade. Shout out Ian Hartitz for posting that on Twitter. I'm seeing the signs everywhere, and I just don't get the ranking in this one. It's really puzzling for me.
Yeah, I think we slightly disagree, but I mean, which is good. I mean, because honestly, we've agreed a lot on these shows, so nice to see a little bit of back and forth when it comes to just not completely agreeing. You know, I think I would agree. I would prefer Rashee Rice over Terry McLaurin. We talked last time. I think there is some regression in touchdowns for Terry coming. I don't see the volume in targets going up. So I think there's regression there for Terry. I prefer Devontae Adams over Rashee Rice. You can sell me maybe on Rice over Mike Evans, but I'll still take Mike Evans there. Maybe you could sell me on him taking him over Tyreek Hill. It's just a matter of like, how far down can Tyreek Hill fall? Where you're just willing to bite the bullet and just really take a chance. Yeah. Tyreek Hill, going, I mean, in the second round, like, is that correct? Let me take a look here. That can't be right.
No, I think he's going around. He's a 2-3 turn.
Yeah, I mean, I can't stomach a 2-3 turn Tyreek Hill at this point in time, to be completely honest with you. I'm okay on passing there. But yeah, I mean, I would prefer Rashee Rice over DJ Moore. I would prefer Rice over Xavier Worthy, his running mate. I'd prefer him over Terry McLaurin. And I would prefer him over Tyreek Hill at cost. Now, if Tyreek and Rashee were both in the fourth round, like Rashee is middle fourth, then you can maybe sell me on that, right? I guess no. I mean, he's middle third. He's middle third round. It's
just tough. Like, it's just one of those things where you're like, maybe, like we do this with running backs, right? Like, I would rather have Najee Harris in the 10th than, somebody of less, let's see here. Let me just pull up than potentially like James Cook in the late third or fourth or whatever. Now, I'm not saying I believe that. I'm just saying, like, we do that in fantasy, right? Like, I like the cost here versus the risk and opportunity there. That's kind of more where I lean with Rice, although I would take him straight up over most of those guys. I'm maybe not reaching for him as aggressively, especially if you're looking at like JSN and, Bucky Irving and going around some of those turns. But I just think he has a higher floor than a lot of these guys with a pretty similar ceiling.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And by the way, it is the middle of the fourth round for Rashee Rice. So I made a mistake. It wasn't middle third, it was middle fourth. A little bit more palatable there. Like take a running back like Amarion Hampton. Like I think his cost in the fourth round is way too high. Not somebody I want to touch. I'd rather take Rashee Rice over him. I'd rather take him over Joe Mixon. I'd rather take him over Kenneth Walker, who's in the same round. So there's a lot of things I still prefer Devontae and Mike Evans, who are in the fourth round as well. But let's go ahead and move on to I think it's our final player, Trey McBride, who is down 1.5 spots over the last 2 weeks. Tight end 2. He's going, somewhere at the late second, early third round at the moment. And, Trey McBride is a guy who I feel like Brock Bowers, the hype of drafting him, early second, sometimes people were even drafting him in the first round in best ball, was a little too high. I'd rather take Trey McBride over Bowers at cost. But It's going to be team dependent. I don't know, man. I mean, it's going to really depend on who I get in the first round for me to go ahead and take a swing on Trey McBride. If I get a stud running back like a Jahmyr Gibbs, I can take a chance on McBride
Yeah.
if I like the wide receivers in the next round or two. But I mean, even that, I love Trey McBride, but it's an expensive cost for a tight end.
It is. You just have to really look at like, okay, so we had the wave of tight ends, right? We had like that late 2018, 19, 20, where Kittle, Ertz, Kelsey, they're just dominating and they're doing it in replicable fashion through targets, yards, touchdowns, and they're doing it year in, year out. And then it kind of comes, Kelsey's taking the mantle a little bit. Some guys are challenging him, a little Darren Waller here, a little Mark Andrews there. But you're just seeing a lot of inconsistency in the position. And last year, it really came to a head with just how many busts I truly think there were. McBride is not that. He gives you true positional value, just like I think Bowers does. And with all the inconsistency across the position, across the league, QB carousels, play calling changes, McBride, like I understand him falling if you think you can piecemeal a tight end together later, but if you're talking about like fading McBride straight up, or at least not being in on him, I don't know what you could point to. Is anyone stealing his touchdowns? No. What touchdowns? Can only go up. He's first in target share, first in slot snaps, first in route participation, first in air yard share, and why the hell not first in juke share? Who doesn't love a tight end that can pull off a good juke? Every other important stat, he's no less than top 5. As we talked about last week, I'm high on Marvin Harrison Jr. going into year 2, but not at the expense of Trey McBride. I don't think that happens. I just think you have target consolidation between your top 2 guys. I'm not terribly big typically on positive regression. I just think there's too many variables that go into touchdowns, but purely from a receiving yards standpoint, if everyone's healthy, he puts up 147 targets, 111 catches, 111 or 1100 yards. You throw in 7 touchdowns to that, and you're back to peak Kittle, you're back to peak Ertz. You're not back to peak Kelsey, but you're getting back to maybe, mid peak, something like that. And that's just such an advantage in the game right now.
It is. And when we look at the points per game difference, the top 3 guys last year, George Kittle, Trey McBride, Brock Bowers. Trey McBride actually averaged more points per game than Brock Bowers did. And I mean, Trey McBride missed 1 game.
Incredible.
And this is also a guy in Trey McBride who had 2 receiving touchdowns last year, right? I mean, so I can't justify taking Bowers as high as he is. I'd rather take a chance on McBride at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, because I don't think you're going to see. I think people, because it was such a great year 1, people are a little delusional to think that this is a huge gap between the two. And we're hearing generational, and we're hearing all these crazy things because the quarterback situation was bad, right? Look, Kyler Murray wasn't that good last year either. I mean, to be completely honest with you, I'm not going to sit here and say that Aiden O'Connell and the quarterbacks that the Raiders were throwing out there were great either. But I mean, how good was Kyler last year? In fantasy, he was solid, but you could argue Kyler was a bottom 10 quarterback last year that started maybe a minimum of 5 to 10 games, right? So when you look at the points per game difference, I think you do get a significant edge, with the tight end position. I mean, we're talking, tight end 3 at Brock Bowers, which, scored 15 points just like McBride and Kittle, and then the decimal points a little off there compared to the 2. The tight end 10 was Dallas Goedert, who scored 5 less points per game. 5 more points from the tight end position on a per game basis is a huge bump. And Dallas Goedert only played 10 games last year, right? A lot of these guys on a points per game, like you have Evan Ingram, who scored 9.9 points per game, and he only played 9 games, right? A lot of these guys, even the guys that did play 17, Pat Freiermuth had 9, Tucker Kraft had 9, Zach Ertz had 10.4, right? You had Laporta at 10.9, Mark Andrews at 11, who had played 17. Like a lot of these guys that did play almost full seasons, are a good 3 to 4 to 5 points off per game compared to McBride, who missed just 1. And so, I think to your point, it just depends on who you're taking in the first round. If McBride somehow slips to the third round and you're a dude that's picking number one and you can get like a Jamar Chase, and then maybe get a stud running back in the second on the turn and McBride on in the first
Yeah.
pick in the third, like I'd feel really good about that.
Sure. Absolutely. And you compare that to, I agree with everything you just said, which I hate to end the show on a positive note as always, but you compare what you're getting out of McBride, which the Cardinals are doing something that I love. And no one ever does this. Well, at least typically. They didn't change anything about their offense. It's so rare for a team that has been as mid as they've been and across the board mid, truly, to just run it back. And then you look at, Brock Bowers, who I think's great, but they changed everything. Kittle, he's getting older. He's got the injury problems before. TJ Hawkinson, where does he fit in with this new scheme with McCarthy? Sam Laporta just became the first tight end in 15 years to go into the season as the tight end one and not finish in the top six. So Jonnu Smith, I won't say anything bad about. I love him. He's an angel. Kelsey, you're toast. Mark Andrews, you're going to get traded. Evan Ingram, I love you. Won't say anything bad about you. And then Njoku, God bless you. Who else are you taking? Give me some McBride.
Yeah, Kittle, Bowers, and McBride are the only guys that I feel like have a justified cost.
Yeah.
And again, I think Bowers is still way too high. Don't get me wrong, but like
Yeah.
outside of that, like it's straight shooting blanks, man. Like you have no idea. Like I mean, Jonnu Smith is like a round six guy right now.
Mhm.
I don't trust that that's gonna stay the same.
Yeah.
So it's tough, but. Look, that's going to do it for us, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, go ahead and like this show and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.
Hey, what if I told you there was a Dynasty app where you could get player lifetime values, evaluate trades, including draft picks out to 2028, compare the advanced metrics of two players, look up the sentiment, buy, sell, hold on players? Well, there is a mobile app that has all of that and more called the Dynasty Dominator, and it's $5 in the App Store on Google Play. This is my gift to you, the most affordable Dynasty League domination app available today. And if you already have it, the 2025 class is ready to download. Let's go!